For most of us who grew up in Europe or the US after World War II, Nazism was the face of all that was wrong with the world. Innocent people were rounded up and killed because of their ethnicity or their sexual orientation. Movies like *Inglourious Bastards*, or even more thoughtful films like *Schindler's List* or *La Vita è Bella*, portrayed a brutal system of ethnic cleansing, apparently without rationale. Where rationale was given, it often consisted of some form of blind devotion. Love for the fatherland, love for the Führer, masked a fear and hatred of the other, Jews, Roma, communists, and queer people. That nationalist love inspired a sense of duty on the Aryan German to serve the fatherland, including a duty to brutalize your friends, neighbors, or family if the state called you to do so. But is that really all there was to Nazism? What inspired Hitler to create such an efficient, brutal, and downright evil system? Could part of the answer be found in an ideology that has nothing to do with Jews? In a belief system that began thousands of years before and thousands of miles east of Nazi Germany? Most people think of Hinduism as a religion of yoga and vegetarianism. Fairly orthodox Hindu sects, such as the Krishna consciousness movement, have attracted millions of followers in Europe, the US, and Canada. Most of these followers come to Hinduism seeking refuge from cultures that have traded their reverence of the spiritual for a blind devotion to the market. Capitalism is a system that many find antithetical to human spirituality. For many, Hinduism can offer a belief system and a community of like-minded individuals in a sea of capitalist excess. That's not necessarily an incorrect picture, but it is an incomplete one. Roughly 2,000 years ago, that's about 500 years after the end of the Vedic period, so nearly 1,500 years since the earliest Hindu texts were written, a religious scholar named Manu codified a series of laws. Centuries later, the British would use those laws to form the basis of what they called Hindu personal law, the equivalent of Sharia in Islam or Halakha in Judaism. But the Manusmriti, or laws of Manu, are not an ordinary legal code. If I break the law today, theoretically I would face the same punishment whether I were rich or poor, black or white, native or foreigner. When rich and powerful people get off, or when poor and politically weaker people are punished excessively, sometimes for crimes they didn't even commit, we see that as an injustice. The law is meant to be universal. But Manu's laws weren't universal. What was a crime for some was not a crime for others. An act was judged to be lawful or not, based on the caste and gender identity of the actor. The Manusmriti is often seen as the text that codified the caste system or the four varnas. In this hierarchical system, the Brahmins are on top, but it's the caste second from the top, the Kshatriyas or the warrior caste, that ruled. The lower castes were there to serve the higher ones, often as slaves. And the punishments usually reserved for the lower castes are brutal. Castrations, amputations, beheadings, the whole gambit of medieval torture. Even something that seems as trivial as being ostracized from the community was essentially a death sentence for someone with no money, few resources, and who relied on access to local traders for daily survival. And women of all castes were effectively second-class citizens within their caste, meaning that there are 8 castes instead of 4. The Manusmriti is the face of a Hinduism that is far more brutal than the one that Europe and the US embrace. But once you understand that face, you'll find it staring back at you in the most famous Hindu texts. The Ramayana gives us an extreme example of victim blaming, when Sita has to prove her fidelity after her abduction. She does this by walking through fire, an act that is mimicked in sati, or widow immolation, that still happens, albeit rarely, in India today. The Bhagavad Gita is essentially an epic poem where the god Krishna convinces a reluctant Arjuna to ruthlessly butcher his enemies, even if those enemies are his own friends and family. Perhaps the friendly, cuddly face of Hinduism isn't that friendly after all. So what does any of this have to do with the Third Reich? Despite losing its colonial possessions as a result of World War I, Germany remained a bastion of what Edward Said referred to as Orientalism. Thus it was not unusual for a young Heinrich Himmler to come into contact with translations and commentaries of ancient Hindu texts. Those early encounters led Himmler to return to those texts when he founded the SS Ahnenerbe, a Nazi think tank dedicated to codifying and propagating Nazi racist ideology. To lead that think tank, Himmler chose Walter Wurst, a leading Sanskrit scholar and president of Maximilian University in Munich. Wurst's agenda was to use the so-called Aryan traditions, largely Hinduism, although he was also a fan of Buddhism, to give a religious basis to Nazi beliefs. Even prior to this, the founders of the Nazi Party chose a slight variation on the Hindu swastik as the symbol of the party, showing that Indian influence was there from the very beginning. What Nazism took from Hindu ideology was a glorification of the warrior ethic and a merging of that ethic with the nationalist philosophy that had emerged half a century earlier with the works of German philosophers such as Johann Fichte. In this interpretation, the German nation was comprised of warriors who had become weak due to poor leadership and from not following the Hindu caste laws related to pollution, many of which are laid out in the laws of Manu. In order to liberate the German Kshatriya or warrior, the caste division had to be reinforced. Echoing Krishna's advice to Arjuna, it was every German's dharma, or duty, to ensure that this purification could take place, even if that meant committing unspeakable acts of brutality. Fortunately, Germany today is about the last place where one would expect to see a rise of caste-inspired Nazi ideology. But unfortunately, that ideology is experiencing a resurgence elsewhere, including in India itself. To understand why this is happening, it's useful to go back again to the 1930s and 40s. At that time, someone called M.S. Golwalkar was the leader of an outfit called the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, or RSS. At the time, he writes the following lines: "To keep up the purity of the race and its culture, Germany shocked the world by her purging the country of the Semitic races, the Jews. Race pride at its highest has been manifested here." Those sentences, first published in 1939 and curiously absent from later editions, illustrate that a dialogue was taking place between the originators of caste theory, the ideological descendants of Manu, and practitioners of racialist brutality in Nazi Germany. The RSS would soon be banned after one of their alleged members, Nathuram Godse, murdered Mahatma Gandhi. Although Gandhi was a devout Hindu, he was a firm believer in religious pluralism and abhorred those who used religion to justify their own prejudices. But the ban would eventually be lifted, and when the revolutionary spirit of India's Congress Party started to wilt, the heirs of Manu were there to organize the only meaningful opposition party. Today, the Bharatiya Janata Party functions both as the political arm of the RSS and as the ruling political party in India. Though they represent a variety of policy positions, it's telling that their power often lies in the power of the mob. From organized riots against Muslims in 1992 and 2002 to today's campaigns against interreligious marriage and beef-eating, the politics of division and scapegoating are the BJP's stock in trade. But the surprise is not that people like Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, tolerate violence and polarization, or even that they promote it. The surprise, rather, is that so many people defend, justify, and enable those who are openly advocating for the rebirth of the hierarchical society based on caste identity, including many people who should know better. The politics of division are all around us. Immigrants, Muslims, feminists, communists, Roma, queer folks. These communities are all someone's bogeyman. But maintaining that level of hatred is near impossible when communities actually get to know one another. It's hard to hate immigrants if your best friend is from another country. It's hard to hate black folks if you look up to the First Lady or to Michael Jordan. The Nazis recognized this and tried to turn racism into a religious duty. With help from Manu's casteism, they very nearly succeeded. So today we have a choice. Will we continue the experiments of people like Heinrich Himmler and Manu, and continue to create societies based on the formal domination of one type of person over another? Or will we choose to live by the values that modern democracies were supposedly formed on? Pluralism, human rights, respect for all regardless of creed, class, gender, or religious identity. Hey guys, thanks for watching. When I first started working on this video, I had no idea that discussions around racism in general and Nazism in particular were going to be so relevant. I'm uploading this about 2 weeks after neo-Nazis, also referred to as the alt-right, took over parts of Charlottesville, Virginia, supposedly to protest the removal of the statue of Robert E. Lee, head of the pro-slavery South in the U.S. Civil War. The incident seems to have been a wake-up call for many of us who underestimated the Nazi-inspired far right and the president who they overwhelmingly voted for. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and share it with your friends. This is the first of many video essays we hope to upload here on Peace Vigil, so leave us a comment to let us know what you'd like us to upload next. Peace, salam, shanti, and we'll see you next time.